Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. In the next hour, we are going to talk about open access publishing and more specifically about open access publishing with Leuven University Press. My name is Veerle De Laet, and I'm the director of Leuven University Press. And before we start the meeting, I would like to inform you that this session will be recorded. In the next hour, we will be hearing 4 speakers: Mirjam Truwant, Laura Mesotten, Martin Kohlrausch, and Jonas Tinius. Mirjam Truwant, she is an acquisitions editor with Leuven University Press, and she will talk about the open access publishing program at our publishing house, and she will also expand on the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access. Next, we will be hearing Laura Mesotten. Laura is process coordinator and open scholarship expert at KU Leuven Libraries. She will be talking about open access readership data. Afterwards, we will be inviting 2 of our authors. Martin Kohlrausch, he is author of the monograph Brokers of Modernity, which was published in 2019 with Leuven University Press, and he's also professor of European political history at KU Leuven. And finally, we will be hearing Jonas Tinius, who is the editor, or one of the 2 editors, of the volume Across Anthropology, Troubling Colonial Legacies, Museums and the Curatorial. He's currently postdoctoral researcher in cultural anthropology in Saarland University. So those speakers are on the program for this afternoon's talk. And of course, we will be concluding with a Q&A session. If you happen to have questions during the talks, please be invited to put them in the chat. Thank you. So I will be starting with a quick introduction on Leuven University Press as a publishing house. So this is us. We are Leuven University Press. We are, as our name already indicates, a university press, an academic scholarly publisher who is affiliated with the University of Leuven, and the press was established in the 1970s, early 1970s. From the very beginning, Leuven University Press had a very strong focus on book publishing, and that's still the case. So the collections is situated in the fields of arts, humanities, and social sciences. We publish monographs, edited volumes. We have a small journal portfolio, and we also publish textbooks. But as said, the focus is heavily on books. We publish books by first-time authors, but also by more established authors. And in terms of profile and affiliation, it can be interesting to know that almost 70% of our authors is not affiliated with the home institute, so has a different affiliation than KU Leuven. So we are functioning and working as an international publishing house, which means that authors find their way to us because of the topic of their book and how the field is represented in our collection. So that's how it works. We have an international distribution system, so the books go worldwide and they find an audience wherever it is situated. We publish books in closed and in open access. By closed, we mean conventional book publishing. Publishing in a traditional way. We publish a book, we make it available in various formats, and we bring it onto the market, and we sell the title to an international readership. Next to the traditional conventional way of publishing, we also offer an open access publishing program. And that's, of course, the focus of this talk. What I would like to stress is that all books that are published by Leuven University Press go through a rigorous peer review process, which means it's a 2-staged peer review process, which means that first the proposal, when it comes in, is assessed by an editorial board. Once the full manuscript is available, we will be addressing 2 external experts in the particular field of research of the manuscript, and we will be asking those referees to draw up to write a reading report. Those reading reports will be sent to the author in the end. When the outcome is positive, we can proceed with the publication track of your book. This process is standard practices at Leuven University Press and is both applied on the closed access books and the open access titles. So there is no difference in the way we are treating books. The fact that we are applying this process as a default to all of our scholarly titles means that we are allowed to add the so-called GPRC label, the Guaranteed Peer-Reviewed Content label, to the colophon of each academic book. Leuven University Press is a compliant open access publisher since 2015, which means that we already have a quite substantial track record in open access book publishing. So we are sure what we are doing, or we feel confident at least as an open access publisher. Then I'm going to say a few things about the benefits of open access publishing. So what makes open access so attractive for you as an author? Why should you publish your book, if possible, in open access? Well, there are a few very good reasons. First and foremost, it's all about impact and visibility. What we notice is that an open access book has 10 times more impact. On average, an open access title receives 10 times more visibility. And this comes, of course, hand in hand with the next typical feature of open access book publishing, and it is that the content of the book is freely available for readers worldwide. So there are no barriers, no financial obstacles when a reader or a user want to access the content of a book. And of course, this has as a consequence that books and content are read wider, and the downloads and the views are definitely from a different nature in comparison to conventional book publishing. So the impact of your book benefits from this characteristic. What we also do at Leuven University Press is we publish the online or the digital edition of the book simultaneously with a print edition. So we make both formats available to the user simultaneously. For each free open access ebook, there is an open access print edition available for those readers who prefer to read on print over digital reading. And last but not least, one of the major characteristics of and also benefits of publishing in open access is that we work for open access titles with a Creative Commons license. So this means that an author retains the copyrights on the work that is published with the publisher. In a traditional or a conventional publishing situation, authors transfer their copyrights to the publishers so that the publisher is able to produce the work and to make it a commercially working product and to bring it into the market. With a Creative Commons license, we are moving away from such a situation, and we just work with a license. So all rights stay with the author, remain with the author, and there is a license for the publisher which allows the publisher to publish the book. There are 6 or 7 Creative Commons licenses, and they define what the user is allowed to do with the work. What we do is we recommend very often the most restrictive, the most protective license, and that's the one which is mentioned on the slide. That is the so-called CC BY and CND 4.0 license, which means that, so this license describes what a user is allowed to do or what he or she can do or should do. And the first thing that the user should do in this case is refer correctly to the cited work. That's what a CC BY stands for. CC BY means you have to cite this source in a correct way by referring properly to the author and mention the full title of the book. So you give full credit to the original publication. NC stands for non-commercial, so every reuse of the content should be done in a non-commercial way. And ND stands for non-derivative, which means that no derivative products may be created from this original content. So that's what, in a nutshell, a Creative Commons license does. And it is, of course, one of the crucial features of an open access book publication. So I will be handing over the mic to my colleague Mirjam Truwant from this point onwards. So she will elaborate a bit more on the open access publishing program at Leuven University Press, and more particularly about the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access. Mirjam, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veerle. Hi, good afternoon. So my name is Mirjam Truwant. I'm the acquisitions editor at Leuven University Press. On this slide, you will notice a few issues that were already mentioned in the past few minutes, but which I will shortly touch upon anyhow. So the reasons to publish open access, they may be multifarious. So one of the most important reasons for authors, one of the main motivations for authors to opt for open access may be the fact that an open access book generates more impact and does so in a significant way. So indeed, on average, we do notice that open access published books, that they do generate more impact. And that is something that our authors may also tell something more about later on during this webinar. This higher impact is, of course, obtained by the fact that there are no barriers, so no financial nor distribution-related obstacles for readers to access the work. So in contrast to our traditionally published works, our closed published works, we do see that there is a truly global usage of our open access titles. So whilst North America and Europe will still account for most of the users, for most of the readers, we do see such a globally diversified readership in a way that none of our non-open access titles could ever be able to achieve. So it's truly unique in that sense, that it opens up the books in a way that could not be achieved by closed publishing. There are, of course, various paths to open access, and as you see here, so green, gold, or diamond. So green open access, that's the most achievable form of open access, so to speak, because it means self-archiving. Green open access applies to edited volumes, not to our monographs, of course, and neither does it apply to our textbooks. So green open access means that authors have the right to archive a certain version of their work. So they can share it on their personal or departmental website, a web page. They can deposit it in institutional repositories in closed access, and the actual PDF of the published version, there's usually an embargo on it that you have to wait for a year until you can share it in your repository and so on. We do not allow sharing on commercial platforms because that goes against the idea of a not-for-profit publisher, such as academia, website, and so on. What else? So the gold open access model will be the one that will be discussed more in detail here today during this webinar. So that means that the open access book will be available in open access in its totality from day one onwards, and it will be available on various platforms. So we collaborate with JSTOR, we collaborate with OAPEN, with Project Muse, and also with Open Research Library. So there are various platforms, and of course authors are free to share the PDF on their own website as well, but in that case we cannot track the usage of the file, which is also something that is quite interesting, as we will see later on, and something that Laura Mesotten will explain more in detail. So in this case, in the Gold Open Access case, it means that book publishing charges apply. So there will be a fee that has to be paid in order to make this book freely available, because of course there will be less sales of the print book, which we also make. So there's another model, financial model of publishing. Diamond Open Access also refers to born open access titles, but unlike the Gold Open Access model, publication fees are borne by a third-party funder, so publication fees do not apply to the author. Leuven University Press participates in all three of these models. We will specifically zoom in on the Gold Open Access, but I do find it worthwhile to mention that Leuven University Press wants to take a vanguard position in exploring various open access models. So that means that that is also the reason why we have entered into collaborations with partners like Knowledge Unleashed, like JSTOR Path to Open, and with Open Book Collective. So there may be more initiatives in the future that we are looking into, but for the bulk of our titles, it is the collaboration with the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access that will be of importance, and this is also what I'm going to be talking about in the next slide. But first, maybe also we can have a look at the other reasons to publish open access that are mentioned here. So the quality control is, of course, the same that applies to all our other titles, as Veerle De Laet already mentioned. We submit all our titles to a rigorous peer review process, and that goes for both our closed and open titles. Then the Creative Commons licenses, as Veerle De Laet already explained, our default CC license is a CC BY and CND 4.0. Sometimes it may happen that external funders require a different license, and that is also something that Jonas Tinius will be able to confirm, because the Cross Anthropology has been published under a CC BY license, because that was a condition by the German party that co-funded the book. So, and if that is the case, we are of course very much willing to adapt our standard policy. It's just that by default, we offer another license, but that does not mean that we are not open to changing it to another license when that is required. So the online and print version, so we never make books that are digital only. There's always double publication in that sense, that there will be a digital and a print version of the book, because as Veerle De Laet already pointed out, some people will in the end prefer to read a book in print, but it may be the case that they first discover the book as a digital open access book and then decide that they do want to have it as a paper version. Marketing and promotion. Well, it's easy or easier maybe to market an open access book because we can freely share the entire book right from the start, and it will catch people's attention. But in terms of marketing efforts, of course, they are the same as apply to our traditionally published books. We have our website, we have our social media, and in the US, we also collaborate with Cornell University Press that also showcases our books on their website, including our open access titles. So they feature all our English titles, so to speak. And then on the next slide, we are going to zoom in on the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access, which I've mentioned earlier. So since 2018, when the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access was established, we have published quite a lot of books in Gold Open Access. So in 2018, this fund was established, and well, we have seen a significant rise in open access titles since then. So I can honestly say that it has been booming, the number of titles that we've made open access. Their percentage in terms of the overall publication output of Leuven University Press, well, their number has been increasing. So I think right now it's definitely half of our titles that are published open access, perhaps even a bit more, but I don't dare to say for certain. But 71 books have been published so far, and 50 titles are in the pipeline and are in preparation to be published within the next 2 to 3 years. And of course, there will be additional titles for that period that will start in the next coming time. So how does it work? So as you see below, I will skip to the bottom of the slide perhaps right away, but the first step to publish with the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access is to submit a manuscript, you can submit your manuscript, but it suffices if you submit your book proposal, and you can already give a summary and a table of contents of the book that you plan to write or that is being written. In that book proposal form, you can then indicate whether you are interested in publishing open access with the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access. So you can indicate whether you wish to apply for partly coverage of the book processing charges. So external authors that are not affiliated with KU Leuven, they can apply for 1/3 of the book processing charges, whereas authors that are affiliated with KU Leuven, they can apply for half of the book processing charges. So that's something that you can indicate in the proposal form already. At that stage, you can also already mark whether you already dispose of the remaining funding that will be necessary to cover the rest of the cost, or you can indicate that you will be exploring certain routes. So it often happens that authors have not secured the remaining funding yet, but they do have an idea of where they could be looking for additional funding. So step 2 is for the proposal to be accepted by our editorial board. So our editorial board meets 5 times a year. That is in February, April, June, September, and November. And when they give the green light to book projects and to a book project that wishes to apply for funding with the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access, the next step is to actually prepare such an application. So this will be done by the author and in collaboration with us, and we submit the application in the end. So when the application is approved by the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access Committee, then the next step is, of course, getting the book out in the open. But before that can happen, it has to undergo a peer review process. And once that has taken place and the book is out, then, of course, the funding can be transferred to Leuven University Press. And so that's for my part. And now I will gladly give the word to Laura Mesotten, who is the process manager of research and open scholarship at KU Leuven, and she will be able to tell you more about user data.
Yes, also welcome from me. So I will talk a little bit about readership data, since for each book published with the support of the KU Leuven Fund for Fair Open Access, we share the readership data online. Maybe first I talk about readership data here. Even though we can't really be sure that someone who views or downloads the book has actually read it. The same goes for if you buy a hard copy of a book, that doesn't necessarily prove readership. However, I think it's safe to assume that if someone views or downloads a publication, that they intend to read it, at least partially. Again, the same goes for if someone buys a book or borrows it from the library, that they plan to at least skim through it. So with that understanding of readership data in mind, it's also important to recognize that gathering and sharing this data comes with its challenges, which I will discuss in the next slide. But nevertheless, we do believe it's essential to make this information public. First of all, because it allows us to provide our authors and interested users with a transparent record of readership information. Second, because these metrics really highlight the added value of publishing in open access, because the numbers clearly show the wide reach and the high impact of these publications. And finally, from our perspective as the funding agency, this data demonstrates that the Fund for Fair Open Access is successfully meeting its goals. However, there are also some important limitations to keep in mind. The first one is that this data shouldn't be used for quantitative comparisons. And nobody should judge the performance of individual books based on this data. They can give us an, albeit incomplete, idea of usage or distribution, but they're not meant for assessing the scientific quality of the work. A second limitation is that since open access books can be freely shared on other platforms as well, such as the repositories that were mentioned, etc. So it is really impossible to track the total number of users. So by definition, the data we display will be incomplete, but it will give a first idea, of course. And finally, usage metrics are influenced by various factors like language, subject interest, marketing activities, etc. So how we engage with this data really differs from title to title, taking into account all of these different factors. I can move to the next slide. So I've briefly talked about the strengths and limitations, and I also just want to mention some challenges that we face in gathering and then displaying this information. One major advantage of open access books is that they are available on various platforms, because this again boosts their reach and their impact. However, currently, there is no standard way to gather and present usage metrics, meaning that readership data are quite platform specific. So if we look at the three main platforms where Leuven University Press shares its open access books, JSTOR, Project Muse, and OAPEN, we see that each one collects their data in a different way. One key difference is that OAPEN provides readership data for the entire book, while JSTOR and Project Muse only give numbers for individual chapters. So this makes it very tricky to combine the data into one total number, because we aren't adding up the same things. For example, a user who wants to read the whole book just needs one click from OAPEN, while if they would go through JSTOR or Project Muse, they would need to download each chapter individually, leading up to a lot of more clicks. So that's why we have also decided to present OAPEN's metrics separately from those of JSTOR and Project Muse, because it's just not right to add them up into one number. And additionally, even the way the chapters are counted also differs. So the reports from JSTOR exclude usage for the table of contents, front matter, etc., while Project Muse does include this kind of content. So this means that if a user only looks at the table of content, JSTOR wouldn't count that access, but Project Muse will include it in their numbers. And a final thing I wanted to mention is that JSTOR and Project Muse count both views and downloads. OAPEN, on the other hand, only reports on download numbers. So they actually do provide readers with the option to view the book through a PDF viewer, but their metrics really only focus on the downloads. So again, the numbers of OAPEN are an underestimation of the actual usage of the book. Along with the numbers, we also provide a readership map, which is shown on the next slide. And this map shows the geographical reach of the publication. Again, here it's also important to remember that we cannot give a completely accurate picture. We can only display the access locations if users have allowed the platform to track this information. And even then, we cannot be entirely sure because users might be using VPNs to protect their IP addresses. But that being said, the geographical data clearly shows us that the open access books are being read all over the world, even in places where, due to financial constraints, it would have been very difficult to buy a physical copy or access it through an institutional subscription. So I think that these metrics really can reassure us that open access makes it possible for the books to reach anyone, anywhere. To wrap up this section of the webinar, I would like to just conclude by saying that while this readership data comes with its complexities, we do believe that the figures are still worth sharing as long as we acknowledge these complexities and the limitations that I have just mentioned. Because after all, I really think that this data provides a valuable insight into the reach and impact of these open access publications.
All right, thank you very much, Laura, for your talk on the readership data and the magic behind gathering and collecting and counting those usage numbers. Thank you. Now I would like to give the floor to Martin Kohlrausch, who is an author of Leuven University Press, and as I said in the beginning, in the introduction of the talk, he authored the monograph Brokers of Modernity, and we would like to give him the opportunity to share his experience with us, but particularly we would like to hear more about how it was to publish an open access book and how was the reception afterwards, etc. So please, Martin, feel free to share whatever you would like to share within this group.
Yeah, many thanks, Veerle. Many thanks everyone for having me. I hope you can hear me well. If that's the case, some very brief insights, thoughts on the publishing process. So I'm not going into detail on what the book is about. You now heard where to download it if you're interested in, but let me just say it's a kind of a rereading of modernism and modernist architecture in European history through the angle of a group history of architects, and then specifically the region of East Central Europe. Not so much only or in the first place with the idea to understand the region better, but to focus on a region where I believe we can show the phenomenon in question particularly well to understand it in its broader relevance. So that means it's an interdisciplinary story. It's architectural history. It's a bit of history of art, but also history proper, so to say, political history, that is history of East Central Europe, urban history, STS, science technology studies, and some other fields. It's also to a certain degree global history. I think that's important for understanding the expectations coming with the publication process. I was initially when Veerle first approached me with the idea to publish the book Open Access, bit doubtful for two reasons. So one was simply that something that's for free might be perceived as less attractive. Right? That's probably this capitalist logic which we more or less all of us have somewhere in our minds. And the second concern was that people would be less likely to buy the physical copy if there would be an open access version out there, also perhaps with an impact on the review, so that some scholars might simply think, oh, I'm not going to review the book because I have access anyway. And I still believe that reviews in my field, history, modern history, are quite important. We still went for the open access process. book was funded, got the funding from the Open Access Fund, so that the Open Access publication was made possible, with the caveat that we decided that we wouldn't include the illustrations. The book, being on architecture, had quite a few illustrations in the online edition for a practical reason, because there are different rights issues coming with this, but also with the idea that then people would have they could grasp the content of the book, but they would still have an incentive to buy the physical copy of the book. And I must say, I'm throughout very positively, I'm very happy with the result, very positively surprised. My concern that the book would be sold less. I will never know how much copies would have been sold without the Open Access publication, but I think the numbers are quite good given the hard times for books we live in. And I think also compared to other similar books, that the number of physical copies sold are quite good. But more importantly and more interestingly, what regards the Open Access publication, of course, the book is much more accessible. And Laura talked about the limits to interpreting the numbers, but I think that's a very clear message one gets from the numbers, that the book was downloaded in, to me, surprisingly high numbers. What's particularly rewarding for me, and that is something I had in mind, we've also discussed with Leuven University Press when going for online publication, open access publication, was that the book was very much downloaded, accessed in the region of East Central Europe. I think that you can see very clearly. I don't have access to the map now, but perhaps that's possible to show this on the map. If you zoom in on the Baltic countries, on Poland, Czech Republic, and so forth, then the download numbers are much higher than you would expect if you would assume it in kind of even share of the book through countries. So that was quite positive. And also I was positively surprised now when having been provided with the latest numbers, that the download numbers do not really seem to decline substantially. And that was something which I found really surprising. So if you publish a book and sell physical copies, I think what you would see, what the experts know more about it, then you would expect that after 2 or 3 years you would really see a decline in sold copies. But this doesn't seem to be is in the same way the case for the open access copy for 2024 or 2023, or given that we still have a few months to go, that do not really seem to be differences if I interpret the numbers rightly, and also with regard to the years before, which is of course something you hope for as a book author. That's always the argument we make as in the humanities, in history specifically, as an argument for publishing books, that they have a longer period in which they stay relevant, and that even after 5-6 years after publication, there's still interest, and hopefully, of course, longer. So I was happy with the result. Laura mentioned this, what you can take from the ciphers numbers, but not. My impression is that the book gets cited. There have been a number of reviews. There has been a translation into Russian, where, of course, the fact mentioned by Veerle that the rights stay with the author came in quite handy, and there will be a Polish publication early next year, which again was easier because I retained the rights as an author. So for me, that was a very rewarding, positive experience. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Martin, for sharing your story here. You still can see the slide here with the views and the download numbers, and it is indeed very impressive to see how they exceed what we are used to see when we are publishing a traditional book. So it is a different world. And as you also already mentioned, Martin, the digital shelf life of the title is much, much longer than what you would expect initially. And this is also something new for us to experience. Together with our authors, we see that indeed over time, there is no significant decline yet visible in terms of views and downloads, which is of course great and impressive, because yeah, it's relevant. Your book stays relevant. It is found by users, by readers, and they do have a very long shelf life. I have even the impression that we are extending the shelf life of monographs within the humanities and the social sciences by publishing them in OA. Thank you once more, Martin, for making time to bring your testimonial. I would like to invite Jonas Tinius as well. He's one of the editors of the book that I showed in the introduction of the talk. This book was published in 2020 across anthropology, and I would like to give the floor to Jonas to also share his publishing experience with the audience here.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm very happy to share a few thoughts. I was wondering, I'm not sure that I can navigate the slides, but if you could maybe move on to the next slide for Across Anthropology, that would be great. Then we have some background information on the book. Yes, exactly, there it is. The first thing I should say, so this is a book that I've co-edited together with a colleague of mine, Margareta van Oswald, who sadly can't be here with me, but we published this book for a number of reasons in open access and also for a number of reasons with Leuven University Press that I would like to highlight in a moment, maybe just briefly for those that are listening. The book is an investigation of the way in which anthropology, social and cultural anthropology as a subject and discipline, as well as a field for the development of certain methods, has been problematized and dealt with in fields beyond itself, across, as it were, anthropology, in fields especially of contemporary art and museal practice. And this was one of the reasons that we wanted to emphasize a wide possible distribution of the book, because it is, as one can already kind of see in the subtitle, a book that speaks across different fields, and not just, as it were, thematic academic fields, but also fields of professional practice. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for academic books, which usually have a particular price and which are often, if accessible, then through particular libraries that maybe not everybody has access to. And so for us, it was really important to have a book that could be accessible by curators, by artists, by activists. In this case, as Martin also already mentioned in relationship to his book, our book was really dealing with colonial legacies in Europe. And so obviously, we're talking about a whole host of countries beyond Europe from which we wanted the book to be accessible. This was really one of the very important aspects for us in terms of making the book accessible. The second thing that we've been wanting to emphasize, and maybe this also brings in a slightly different dimension, is that I think if we're dealing with, fields that are, let's say, using different means of reflection, of theorizing, of publishing, of creation, like the arts or like the curatorial field or like museums and maybe even journalism and other kinds of fields that we could imagine, the distribution of material, I think, is thought of in a slightly different way. And I guess maybe Martin touched upon this, I guess in the field of architecture maybe too, where yes, of course, the book has a certain kind of value as a physical copy. And it's a kind of weird simulacrum holding the physical copy up here as we're talking about open access. But there is something about, let's say, the modularity of information and of data. And I think this is something which I really would like to highlight in this case. And one of the reasons also why we decided to go for the particular license that we've chosen, the CC BY 4.0, because we really wanted the book. We didn't want to make money with it, which is anyway, I think, a slightly absurd aim, but we really just wanted people to be able to reshuffle in some ways the book, to be able to use some of these elements. We've actually done this. I'm just going to try and pick out another book here that we've done together afterwards without having my whole shelf collapse. We've done this afterwards with another book that we've published in open access called Awkward Archives. We published this with another publisher I won't mention now here, but this really, the whole idea was to create a completely modular book that could be in some ways ripped apart and reused in curricula and all kinds of other ways. And so that was one of the reasons why we really wanted to emphasize the possibility of fragmenting the book, let's say. That brings me now to another element that is really fantastic and that for us was really helpful. And I think also one of the elements that has really driven the wide distribution of the book and also the surprising download numbers. And that is the fact that we've decided in this book to include interviews with, I think, 10 or 11 curators. And of course, it's an edited volume, so there are multiple contributors to the book. And with an open access book where each chapter can be downloaded individually, I think it really facilitates the multiple forms of use of such a book. In our case in particular, it's been very widely used in teaching contexts outside of classic academic subjects. So in art schools, in curatorial studies classes, actually in museums in particular, where a lot of these academic and theoretical debates that we're discussing are kind of feeding back into professional practice. And so this, I think, has been really helpful, that individual chapters could be distributed by individual authors in a very easy way. What else could I maybe share about the open access strategy? I think perhaps something, Martin, that you mentioned about the assumption of value, as it were, of a book, if the physical copy is there, I would perhaps to some extent say that we're really seeing a different way in which we begin to use, let's say, digital copies or open access. And I want to say this in both a critical and a really kind of hopeful way. The critical way, I suppose, is that we're seeing a strange kind of channeling of power structures as well. I've now been working for the last 5 years in an ERC project that, of course, has as a requirement the publication in open access format. So I think this is really a great way, of course, in which, you know, certain project funding comes with the necessity. So one kind of cooperates with publishers in that way. But it also contradicts to some extent the supposed, I want to say, democratization of access, because those that can afford open access will usually already have acquired a certain kind of funding that is not easy to attain. So it doesn't necessarily always democratize, let's say, the word that gets spread. But what I see as a more hopeful aspect of really this whole development towards open access, and why I'm very, very keen and interested in thinking this further also based on our experience with this book, is the fact that we're really seeing just a different integration, I think, nowadays of digital media, of forms of sharing and spreading, especially across social media, which has also been one of our, as it were, I think, channels of discussing and distributing the book, Instagram lives, different discussions in social media. This is no longer for me such a contrast for the way in which we discuss books. And I think for us, especially publishing this book right the summer of 2020 in the middle of COVID, that was really a lesson that we've, for better or for worse, had to learn. So I'll stop at this point, maybe, and if there are any further comments or questions, maybe also from the audience, I'm happy to respond.
Many thanks, Jonas, for sharing your experience and thoughts about open access publishing. There is something that I would like to add to what you said a minute ago about the democratic or not so democratic character of open access publishing. That's true to some extent. Open access funding systems are reproducing power structures, you could see. But in answer to that, we've seen the development of diamond open access. And for diamond open access, for instance, we're not looking any longer at individual authors or editors to fund the open access publication of their book, but there is a consortium, a group of libraries, of funders, sometimes an anonymous group of institutes that is financing in a structured way open access publications. So that's partly an answer to what you mentioned as the not so democratic character of gold open access, which is for sure true. In addition to that, what I also can mention is that there are several systems, and it's also being applied at Leuven University Press. There are ways of waiving fees and giving the stage to authors who come from various backgrounds, who have less access to resources, to funding, is also part of the open access ideology. And that's also something that really matters to us here at Leuven. So we do from time to time waive fees because we find it important that also those authors who have limited access to financial resources can have the opportunity to publish their book in OA. But it's a very interesting remark, and I think indeed at individual project level, and if you're working on a research project that is funded by one of the big funders, then of course you are playing in a different league. And I think it is very interesting to see how the open access publishing landscape is slightly but still adapting to the situation and tries to find creative ways of being more inclusive when it comes to publishing books. So this is just a short extra thought to what you mentioned, and which is of course a very interesting discussion to further explore. So thank you once more.
I forgot,
Sure.
Sorry, Veerle, just one small footnote that I think I saw in Martin's slide as well that I forgot to mention. It's very important. We've actually made use of the KU Leuven Open Access Fund, which was really helpful in our case and actually allowed us then to approach other possible funders. In this case, this was at the time a research center at the Humboldt University of Berlin, which covered another third of the costs, and then the Humboldt University Open Access Fund, which was actually starting at the time. This is another thing that I think maybe we tend to forget. 4 years ago, major universities were still looking for models of how to support open access. Seems both funny and kind of strange at the same time. And they used this as it were initial Kickstarter from Leuven as then a reason to say, right, then we're more happy even to finance this so we can spread the money further. So I think that's really an important aspect that not a lot of publishers are doing. And I think you were one of the first really to emphasize this, and for authors in the future also really important to consider. And the second thing is my plaidoyer, as it were, or my reflection on, I think, open access publishing is not heading in the direction that we should therefore not publish open access, but I think it's just something to be aware of in terms of how and where we spread books, because only print issues are even harder to access in some cases. So
that's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you once more, Jonas, for your very valuable additions and footnotes. That leaves us with 7 more minutes for question and answers. So now the floor is to the audience. If you have questions, if you have heard things you would like to hear a bit more about, please share them in the chat. We are very happy to answer them. Okay, and I see that there is a question added.
Yes, there's a question by Luc de Munk who asks whether it is indeed a case that authors that are affiliated with KU Leuven, that they have to fund 1/2 of the book processing charges themselves. Yeah, that's indeed the case. I can confirm that. Yeah.
Any other question? All right, if that's not the case, if everything was clear, then I would like to thank the...
Oh yes, there's another question on the sharing of the slides, probably, I guess.
Will the slides of this presentation and the recording be shared among the participants? The slides can definitely be shared afterwards. I believe that we have your email addresses.
Yes.
So we can share them without any problem. The recording will be shared depending on the quality of the recording. So you will get a notification if you're going to do something or make it available, etc. But it will really depend on what the outcome is. So, all right. Then we have arrived at the end of the session. So I would like to thank all speakers once more. Thank you for making time and presenting here in this webinar on open access publishing. And thank you, audience.
I think there's one person still typing.
Okay, I was too quick.
Totally.
Still 5 minutes to go. Yeah, why not?
Not a question, but just a confirmation that it was hopefully useful.
All right.
But I do see another question in the Q&A.
And a Q&A, yeah, because some people use a Q&A and others the chat.
And I should say you can also share my email address with people in case they might want to address editors or authors and not directly go to the press, which I understand. Although, of course, you are more than open to all kinds of questions, I'm sure. But I'd be happy for that.
They can apply with you directly to learn how it was to collaborate with Leuven University Press in particular, for instance. Yes.
All right. Yeah, the question in the Q&A part of the chat was already answered. There was a question by Luc de Munk.
Yes. So does Leuven University Press?
I see another one as well.
Yeah. If we help in searching other funds, what we can do, that is, for instance, when authors approach other funding instances, they often need some background material or quotes or letters. So that's something that we definitely help with. But it's truly up to the author to explore the landscape of external funding. We can provide some help, but in the end, it will be the author who has to look for funding, and we can then provide support. But yeah.
Okay.
But there's also a question by Natalia.
Yeah.
Okay.
I found a question meanwhile.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll look at that first.
So in case you are planning a translation, I think this was mentioned by Martin as well. So if you publish a book in English with us, for instance, you retain the copyrights on the work, which means that you can later onwards publish a translation with another publishing house. So you're free to do this. You have the full rights to use the content or reproduce the book in different formats and or in other languages. In addition to this first question, there's a second question that builds on it, and it's if yes, will it be translated and republished by KU Leuven or by another editorial house? Then we make a publishing decision based on the new product. So if you present us a new proposal, the idea of having a translation in Spanish, for instance, then we will be discussing this new book project and decide whether it's a good fit, a right match for Leuven University Press. In case of a Spanish translation, I would be inclined to say it might be better to work with a publishing house who is better situated in that part of the market. But as said, we are treating this project then as a separate project, and the main reason to proceed or not to proceed is based on the content, like what is this kind of work that is presented to us, and is this a good fit for what we are currently doing, language-wise, but also topic-wise.
Yeah, and in that sense, it can also work the other way around, so that a book has been published open access in another language, and that the author approaches us for the English language edition. So that's also something that happens.
Yes, exactly. All right, I believe no more questions came in meanwhile. In that case,
I will just check if the new posts. Yes. So what is a ballpark BPC? So my university has funds for open access, but only up until a certain amount. There is for the calculation of book processing charges, we always would need the word count and the image count to make an estimate of the overall size of the book. And of course, the ultimate BPC will depend on the size of the book, but there's of course a base cost. And I think on average for a 300-page book, I think we're speaking, and Veerle, you may correct me, but about 9,000 to 10,000 euro. That was the full book processing charges, and yeah, so you can apply for either 1/3 or half of that amount. But if you need a specific estimate, you can just contact us and we can make a more accurate calculation and give you a more specific idea of the book processing charges.
All right.
And there may be even more questions.
I think
that was just a remark. Yeah.
So, and we also have reached the end of the time slot. So it's 3 o'clock sharp now. We are going to conclude this webinar. If you have any other question, please don't hesitate to address us directly. You can send an email to the email address as mentioned here on the slide. I would like to thank the speakers once more, and
Absolutely.
I would like to wish you a lovely afternoon.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Ik had niet gedacht dat het nu